Hey everyone, it's Ego of Zeus here, and in this video I wanted to talk about something that I've thought about before that it seems like a lot of people, um, mainly non-pagans, but even sometimes some pagans, they tend to kind of like simplify the gods. Like they kind of like just associate them with one thing and kind of make them seem kind of one dimensional or something when there's, so much more to the gods than just one attribute or something. So I made a list here of the 12 Olympians, but also Hecate, because I feel like she's one of the main deities that people tend to kind of oversimplify in modern day. But I'll get to her. I'll get to her later, but to explain more of what I mean. But anyway, so I made a list here of like I said, mainly the 12 Olympians, and I wrote down kind of what people tend to think of them as, and then I wrote down uh I wrote down like what they actually are, like their attributes and like their dominions and stuff like that. So yeah, I basically wrote down like what people tend to think they are and then what they actually are is basically what this list is. All right, so starting with Zeus, people tend to think of him as just the god of thunder, lightning, the sky, and being the king of the gods, and that's it. That's all he is. But in reality, he is all that, but also he's the god of justice, law and order, cosmic order, destiny, fate, and if you go back even farther to like Proto Indo European times, he is also associated with the sun as well. So, yeah, there's a lot more to Zeus than just thunder and lightning and being the king of the gods. And then Poseidon, people tend to think of him as just being the god of the sea, but in reality, he's not only the sea, but he's also the god of the earth and land, earthquakes, and also drought. But yeah, a lot of people they don't tend to think of Poseidon as being an earth god, being a god of the earth and land, but he actually is. His dominion is the earth, the entire earth, the sea and the land. Just like Zeus, his dominion is the sky slash heavens, and Hades' dominion is the underworld. So yeah, Poseidon is actually an earth slash land god as well. And then Hermes, people tend to just think of him as being the messenger of the gods and also a trickster god, similar to like Loki from the Norse pantheon. But in reality, he is the messenger of the gods. I mean, I guess you could kind of see him as a trickster god, but not really how people view him, like Loki kind of type of trickster god. But he's also the god of herds and flocks, travelers and hospitality, roads and trade, thievery and cunning, heralds and diplomacy. Diplomacy. Oh my gosh. I always want to say diplomat or something when I read that word. Diplomacy. Language and writing, athletic contests and gems, astronomy and astrology, and he's also a psychopomp, which means he guides souls to the afterlife. So since he is the god of cunning, I can kind of see him being kind of a trickster god in a way, but I wouldn't compare him to Loki from the Norse pantheon. And another thing about Hermes being the god of athletic contests and gyms, I feel like that's something that people just never really focus on. Like, usually when people talk about sports and athletic contests or going to the gym, they usually think of Ares and Heracles, but I never really see people mention Hermes with that. So that's kind of interesting. All right, and then next is Hera, and people think of her as just being the queen of the gods and the wife of Zeus. And she is that, but also she's a goddess of marriage, women, and also the sky and the stars. So there's definitely more to her than just being the queen and the wife of Zeus. And I know a lot of people, especially well, also pagans and non pagans, they think negatively of her because of mythology, because she's usually portrayed as bitter and jealous and really negative in mythology. But obviously, that's just stories. That's not how she really is. But anyway, but yeah, there's definitely more to her than just being the queen and wife of Zeus. And then next, Hephaestus. And I feel like Hephaestus is one of the gods that people like do tend to think of him as how he actually is, because people think of him as like a smith, like a god of like blacksmithing, and he is that, and also the god of fire, craftsman, metalworking, stone masonry, and sculpture. But I feel like he's one of the gods that people do kind of think of him accurately, being the god of like blacksmith or smithing, and fire and crafts and metalworking. So yeah, he's one of the few that I think are, people kind of think of him pretty accurately. And then Dionysos, people tend to think of him as just being the god of wine and, maybe partying, and that's it. But he's also the god of vegetation, pleasure, festivity, madness, wild frenzy, freedom, and joy. So he's definitely more than just wine and partying. Um, and then Demeter, she's another one that I feel like people think of her pretty accurately because she's the goddess of agriculture, and that's usually how people think of her. But she's also the goddess of grain and bread as well. But people tend to think of her as like the goddess of agriculture, which I think is pretty accurate. Um, and then Athena, people tend to think of her as just being the goddess of wisdom and war, but she's also the goddess of good counsel, uh, defense of towns, heroic endeavor, weaving, pottery, and other crafts. So I feel like her association with weaving and crafts is kind of, people don't tend to think about that with her. So, and then next, Artemis. People think of her as the goddess of hunting. She's also the goddess of the wilderness, wild animals, childbirth, and protectress of young girls. And I feel like her being the goddess of childbirth and protectress of young girls gets, people, not a lot of people tend to know that about her. People just think of her as being, the goddess of hunting and the wilderness and wild animals, but not really her associations with childbirth and her being the protectress of young girls. So, and then Apollon, most people tend to just think of him as being the god of the sun, which was, um, he gained that attribute later during the Roman times. But yeah, people tend to think of him as just being the god of the sun, but he's also the god of healing, music, song and poetry, prophecy and oracles, archery, plague and disease, truth and light, which his association with light is what ties him to the sun. And he's also the protector of young boys. Like his sister Artemis is the protectress of young girls, he's the protector of young boys. So, yeah, there's definitely more to Apollon than just being a god of the sun. And then Ares, he's, people tend to think of him as just being the god of war, but he's also the god of courage and strength and of civil order. So I feel like Ares is another god. He gets misrepresented a lot. People tend to think of him as this, just bloodthirsty brute that just likes to fight and go to war, and you know but that's not how he is. He's a protector. He's courageous, he's strong, he I mean, he's a god of civil order, so he's definitely not what people think he is. And then Aphrodite, people tend to think of her as just being the goddess of love and beauty, but she's also the goddess of pleasure and procreation, passion, and she's also a goddess of war. Well, she's associated with war. Um, so she's like the passion of war. But so I wouldn't really say she's like a war goddess like Ares and Athena, but I would say she is associated with war, which I actually did a video about that before, about Aphrodite being a war goddess. She, especially in Sparta, she was seen as a war goddess. So, yeah, she's definitely more than just the goddess of love and beauty. And then finally Hecate. She's the one that I was talking about earlier that I feel like she gets kind of simplified a lot, and especially modern times with especially in like the witchcraft community with like modern witches and neo-pagans. Um they just see her as solely a goddess of witchcraft and magic. And although she was associated with witchcraft and magic back in ancient times, but there's so much more to her than just being associated with witchcraft and magic. She's also the goddess of the night, the moon, ghosts and necromancy, the crossroads. Um, she's also a psychopomp. She guides lost souls to the afterlife. And she's also rules over heaven, earth, and sea. Um, so she's also associated with all three planes, the heaven, earth, and sea, but also the underworld, which I guess might be kind of lumped together with earth in a way. But anyway, so she's definitely a lot more than just witchcraft and magic. Like a lot of people, like I said, especially today, like in the modern witchcraft community, they tend to see her as just being a goddess of witchcraft and magic when she's a lot more than that. Um, so yeah, that's the list I made. Obviously, there's a lot more gods that get kind of misrepresented and kind of oversimplified. Um, I mean, there's just so much to the gods that you know that we still don't know. That we're us as mortals, we're not capable of fully comprehending their entire nature. It's above our comprehension as mortals. So there's so much more to the gods than people tend to think, especially non-pagans tend to think. They're very um complex beings. They're not just, oh, Zeus is just, the god of the sky and thunder. He's so much more than that. Law and order, justice, cosmic order. He's, so much more than just faith and destiny. He's so much more than just, thunder and lightning, you know? So, uh, yeah. That's all for this video. I just wanted to make this video because it was something I thought about today, but also something I thought about before. So I've been kind of planning to make this video for a while now, but I finally did the notes today. So yeah. All right, that's it for this video, and I will see you guys in the next video. May the gods bless you all. Bye.